For anyone who attended our sessions this morning, you probably had the pleasure of meeting Charles Drayson. Charles is a UK lawyer and legal tech observer. He has been using document automation for over 20 years in the preparation of contracts, mostly IT contracts. And here at Legito, Charles is the thought leader who writes and posts articles on timely matters in our industry. If you haven't had an opportunity to read some of these, I strongly encourage you to do so. So with that said, with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Charles. Please welcome Charles Drayson to the stage.
I'm juggling a few things here, and they just said this is really expensive not to drop it, apparently. So, my name's Charles Drayson. Great to see you all. I'm Legito's Chief Community Officer, but I'm not a full-time member of the Legito staff. My normal role is more like yours. I work with documents most of the time. I'm a UK lawyer, and my background is mostly with large UK law firms, and I also did quite a long spell as general counsel for an organisation. But my Legito role is about sharing stories and experiences to show what can be achieved with solutions like this. So my journey with document automation began at the dot-com boom. We were really busy, too busy to do work in the traditional way. I became immersed in what we now call legal tech. That wasn't a phrase then. But much of the last 20 years has been about using legal tech to modernize legal practice, modernize legal operations, and using automation to get work done. And in that time, I've had quite a few reactions. And the reactions vary from, well, I can think of one partner who stood me up at a conference like this, said, our work is too complex, too specialized, too skilled to have anything to do with a product like this. We were talking about document automation. And at the other extreme, to people who said, thank heavens there might be some way of lightening the load that we've got. Probably the most interesting automation journey I had was automating the suite of mortgage documents for one of the global banks. That was a 6-month project. Just to give you a feel for some of the others, the longest running project I had was something I sponsored when I was General Counsel. We put in place a suite of contract templates, which we used for 16 years until eventually they were replaced. And in that time, we automated about 20,000 commercial contracts. And I'm guessing that revenue would have been about £500 million. Services for that were in about 70 countries. How am I here today? Well, the first thing is, the reason I'm here today is because some of the other people here, people like Gary Johnson, Mark, who some of you have seen today, Mark Settle, John, who you've met. Our time together goes back quite a few years in this industry before Legito even existed. And when they joined Legito, and they all came, I figured this has to be going places because I trusted them. And I knew it would be a fun place to be. But I'm also here because I think we're at a turning point. We're at a turning point in the adoption of technologies like Legito. Because there's now a serious recognition from serious organizations that technology is a must-have. We must do it to augment document-centric processes. And I'm also here because at last I can see in Legito a solution that goes beyond what we just used to call document automation and can now span the whole end-to-end process. Okay, this conference is about inspiration, interaction, and action. It's about recognizing why your work matters and how you can all take energy and give energy to your peers in this room, challenge each other, and share opportunities and ideas. And I do look forward to seeing you later. But I just want to get a feel for who's here, which is actually going to be quite difficult with these lights. What type of business are you in? I'm going to get you to do a show of hands in a minute. Maybe you're in the document production business. Maybe the value of what you sell is in the documents. Maybe you're an advisory business. Maybe you sell products and services. Of course, maybe you don't fit in any of these, but try. If you're with a big organization, perhaps answer this question from the perspective of your team and your internal customers. So, hoping that I can see a little bit, I'm going to step forward without falling off. Let's have a show of hands. Who's in category number 1? Not very many. Category number 2? Yep, a few people there. Category number 3? Okay, so it's mostly categories 2 and 3. Okay, why are we spending time together to discuss document-centric automation? Why does it matter? It matters because documents are containers for important information on which our organizations depend. And if they don't, why are you bothering? Documents tell the outside world about our commitments, our promises, our direction of travel. They communicate what we treat as important. They create impressions. They leave a record that lingers after verbal conversations have finished. They can open or close doors to people before you get a chance to have those conversations. And they endure for years. History may judge you from the documents you create. And before then, a court may judge you from the documents you create. Done badly, they can trip you up. But done well, they can give you the benefit of the doubt. And in a world that still has prejudices about judging people by the way they look, by their body language, documents give you a chance to make an objective, fair impression before you even get to meet them. Documents are important. What you do matters. When you speak, the listener must scrutinize what you say in real time. But when you use a document, they have a chance to read it, to take their time, to find fault. And they do. So let's think about how documents are consumed. I said documents are a container for information. And I was going to ask a volunteer at this point until we realized that somebody was likely going to kill themselves to come up here. So I'm going to call John back on the stage. Okay. I have here a bag of rice. And John's job, John, you're at home, you're about to cook a meal. You do cook, don't you, John? You do. I want you to open that bag of rice just as you would at home. Actually, it wasn't supposed to be quite that much mess, John, but thank you. John's going to get to clear us up in a minute.
I'll clean this up for you, Charles.
Okay. Who uses a whole bag of rice when they cook a meal? No, me neither. What do we think of the packaging of that rice? How do we like it as a convenient way to store what we don't use? By the way, John, you might want to come back with that brush in a minute before someone. Now, has anyone got at home one of these? We call them Tupperware in the UK, but I believe it's not called Tupperware here. One of these containers, that nice reassuring click that you hear when you close it. Any good for storing rice? Maybe a bit bigger. Do we like this as a container better for storing stuff? I asked you all what business you're in. If you're in the business of handling documents, I suggest you're in the packaging business. You're in the business of packaging information. And information that has to be packaged in a way that's convenient for your audience. Packaged in a way that can be reused. Packaged in a way that the contents won't be lost and that you won't annoy the customer. Okay, who's got one of these? I hope the camera can pick it up. Storage tray. Lots of containers. It's got all the same great features of that Tupperware, but it's got another advantage. At home, actually, this was containing a load of nuts and bolts of different sizes when I was mad enough to try and restore a boat. So it's got one great advantage. You can sift things into their different sizes. Now, sure, I could just shove all the nuts and bolts in one big container, but this makes it easy to store what I need where I need it. I bet your documents would be more useful as containers if they were more like this. This container isn't just a storage device. This is an organizing device. I could write a label on each of the compartments to identify what's there and where things belong. And then sometime later, if I need to come back and find stuff, I don't have to remember how I stored it. I can easily find it. In short, if I use boxes like this, I can spend more time using the contents and less time looking for the contents. Does it mean my work is simple if I use devices like this? Does it mean I work in a simplified environment? When they build an Airbus, they take their components from racks of things like this. They follow a set process, and that's advanced engineering at work. Many of the documents you create are built using information, let's call it data, produced in some part of your organization, maybe coming from your customers, maybe coming from your suppliers. And when you package it in a Word document without any further thought, you risk losing the structure of that data for good. If I just stored all my nuts and bolts in this, you can see the difficulty. Now, there's probably a machine out there that would sift through all those nuts and bolts using a clever robotic process and sort them in order. And so it is with software solutions. There are companies out there selling really clever AI tools. There are people with advanced postgraduate educations using artificial information and machine learning to extract information from old documents. They say they can do automatic contract reviews. They can search through document repositories to see what's necessary for litigation. They can review documents to extract the metadata so that they can be filed properly in a document management system. And if you've got no choice, that software could be a solution for you. But it's not the most dependable solution. Not yet. But the key thing is, you do have a choice. You can start storing documents and handling documents now in a way that befits a digital world. And this is the inspiration we want to offer you. Let's talk about interaction. COVID stopped interaction plainly, and it is really good to meet people here who are here in person today. But that's not the kind of interaction I want to talk about. If you're working with documents, they don't exist in a vacuum. As containers, their job is to carry information from people, organizations, and systems to others who need it. There are people who contribute to your documents. There are those who will check them, who will approve them. There are those who will scrutinize what they contain. There are the people who negotiate them, manage them, use them as a reference source, and store them later for later retrieval. In the early days of document automation, software companies had tools to assemble documents from variable data. And those tools did get better and better. It's now possible to automate just about anything you might put into a Word file, including the metadata. But they had a problem. After a document was created, the tools had nothing more to offer. They were no better and no worse than any Word document created by any traditional means. They moved around, mostly by email. They got edited, and worse, they usually got printed. And once printed, they lost what little was left of their digital origins. And they entered our business processes with all the sophistication of bureaucracy that's been around for generations. And most of the early adopters of document automation wanted to go further. And they were actually surprised to find the technology had a short reach. Now sure, there were other tools. We had business workflow tools. We had document storage tools. And fairly recently, we had document signature tools, all in a digital context. But if you wanted a technology to help you with an end-to-end process, you had to implement multiple tools. You had to deal with manual handoffs between them. Or you could build integrations that were difficult to manage, because as soon as one of the components changed, the integration had to be updated. And many of those solutions were designed for specific subject matter, which actually made it really difficult to employ on an enterprise-wide basis. And even the organizations who deployed those multiple tools faced a problem. The tools were okay if the document flowed one way through a process. They didn't work so well if a document had to move backwards through a process. The tools effectively assumed that organizations could operate a standard process. Now, have you ever tried to impose a standard process on your customers or your suppliers? I can say what happens when you do that. When you deploy a standard process, the people in that process start to treat the technology as an obstacle, something to be avoided. They'll game the system. They'll avoid the system. They'll ignore your process, and they'll use words like pragmatism and commerciality. And why? Because a standard process like that doesn't recognise the role of humans. It doesn't recognise the interaction between humans and organisations. Now, there are one or two global organisations who get to dictate how we consume their products and services, the commercial process for buying them. But the rest of us, we have to live in a different world. When your organisation wants the benefit of automation, leave a space for the humans. Leave a space for negotiation, for change, and even for real work. And whatever systems you deploy, build in some flexibility. So my first automation project was, as a general counsel, for a sales-driven organisation. Sales are hard, they're messy, they're long. It'd be really easy to criticise salespeople for taking shortcuts to get deals done. But those are the folk who provide the power and the growth behind companies. On the other hand, we had to do something to manage their antics. We launched a contract automation tool at a sales conference. But we made a bargain with them. And the bargain I made is this: you must use the automation tools that we give you today. But in return, we must make the tool usable. And if either of us fails in that bargain, we expect to be challenged. And that's the same bargain I've offered to other organisations since. And let's look at what that means. It means we build a system which does the tedious work, the work which makes it easy for users to do the right thing by default, to follow rules without having to read through pages of policy documents. It's a system that caters for predictable variation. And it's a tool that makes it easy to do the simple stuff, but it frees up the time of humans to do human work, things that aren't simple, things that aren't predictable. If we see a benefit to automating a document or a process, it's our job to make it more attractive than doing things manually. It must be a tool that users will miss if it wasn't there. Such a tool needs multiple features in one place. Now, there's always going to be a demand for more features, more insight, more analysis, more breadth, and of course it must allow for interaction. That kind of deployment has to evolve, because it's too hard to do everything in one go. Start with simple solutions that use just a proportion of the features available, and wait for users to ask for more, because they will. When we ship Legito with more and more features, we are not advocating that you should use all of them. We just want to make sure you've got the tools that you do want there for when you do want them. There's still much value in simple document automation that does nothing more than create the first version of a document. But when you've got that success under your belt, you will want more, and we just want to make sure you don't outgrow the solution when your ambitions get wider. Inspiration, interaction, action. And none of this is any good without the action. And of course we'd like some action. We'd all like to increase the adoption of Legito. But I'm going to share a problem that organisations in this industry have had for many years. Our biggest competition does not come from competitors. Our biggest competition comes from apathy, from organisations that won't deploy any solution at all. And this is the challenge I find most interesting, because this is where there's change on the horizon. The automation of document-centric processes is becoming a must-do rather than a nice-to-have. And there's a number of forces pushing in that direction. Let's start with the Great Resignation. Right now in the UK, there are more job vacancies than there are unemployed people in the country. If every single unemployed person takes a job, we will still not have enough workers to fulfil our labour needs. We've got a shortage of labour, but in particular, we have a shortage of skilled labour. And the cost of that labour is going up with inflation, the likes of which we've not seen since the 70s. The second pressure comes from the expectations of the generation that is entering our workplaces, the generation that now has the dominant exposure to transactional procedures and business processes. I'm talking about the graduates who enter the workplace and they've got experience of the tools that are available, because vendors make sure of that. My son graduates in a few weeks, and he starts work with Accenture in September. When he starts working with data and documents, as he surely will, he's going to approach that work as a digital native. You've all heard the phrase. But when I say digital native, I don't just mean kids who are good at typing or good with computers. It's more deep than that. This generation expect to augment their work with technology to do their work more easily and to get results more quickly. And I've seen this among the trainee lawyers at the law firm where I consult. They are not willing to do their training using the same laborious ways that we did our training. They won't read pages of long policy documents pertaining to their task. The impatience of youth is now fueled by a diet of technology with great user interfaces, and actually, if anything, they arrive with an overinflated expectation of what can be delivered by artificial intelligence. The third pressure comes from customized services. In every field of commerce and manufacturing, customers want personalized, commoditized services, but without paying high-end prices. When I invest in a pension, I can configure my pension to the kind of investments I want. I can pick ethical investments. I can pick Asia investments. When I buy insurance, I can select policies that cover my gadgets, my car, my pets, my house, any combination that I need. If I borrow money to buy a house with a mortgage, I can get a fixed interest loan, a variable loan. I can choose the duration. I can secure it on my house, maybe another house I own. I can mix all those options together. When my company wants servers, we can configure the capacity, the bandwidth, the speeds, the processors, the network, and we can change that overnight and spin it up more or less on demand. Now, if you're selling any of those things, your order forms, your quotes, your delivery specs, and your contracts need to cater for all those permutations. Moreover, if you're in an industry that's regulated, your documents and procedures had better be compliant, because despite that complexity, you've still got to get it right. Get a mortgage document wrong, you won't collect the debt. Get pension administration wrong, you'll get fined by the pension administrator. Get a server configuration wrong, and you may have a security backlash from which you find it hard to recover. You're in the business of packaging information into documents that's getting harder and more critical at the same time as we have fewer people available to do it and fewer people willing to do it. And these pressures call for action. And you could decide today what action you will take. The business of creating and handling documents is important. What you do matters. Inspiration, interaction, action. I hope you'll take all three of these things away from the conference today. Thank you.